South Africa is not a poor country. We have a combination of natural beauty and resources and resilience that is the envy of many in the world. For over 350 years, colonialism and apartheid stripped the indigenous people of their land, their livelihoods, and their dignity. 30 years ago, we said the injustice and suffering must stop. We negotiated a progressive constitution, elected a rock star president, and embarked on a new path of equality, fairness, and nation building. Parliament rolled up its sleeves and chucked out all the discriminatory laws. Millions of subsidized homes were provided to families in need. Millions were connected to basic services, and hundreds of new schools and clinics built. But while the lucky few amongst us live good qualities of life, millions of our people continue to suffer, continue to occupy the margins of society where apartheid spatial planning dumped them, continue to be ground to the hardships and dwindling of hope. The fruits of our democracy are yet to be tasted by them. 1 in 6 of us ekes out a living on 350 Rand a month. Nearly 1 in 2 of our young people can't find jobs. Instead of reimagining our spatial framework and bringing people closer together, group areas at ghettos have been extended and new homes developed. There are no jobs for our young people, but only an endless supply of drugs and a number of alcohol outlets. Women and children are not safe in their homes, not on their way to school or to buy a loaf of bread, not in a taxi, not in a mall. And the rate at which our women are killed by intimate partners is 5 times higher than the global average. Justice, reconciliation, and redress sense, common justice, and common purpose. The new nation rested on a delicate balance of acknowledgement, a redress for apartheid suffering, injustice, and nation building. At the same time, as the country was making the political and administrative transition from an old order to a new order, it was under immense pressure to also transform society, socially, economically, spatially, and environmentally. Many commentators, political commentators today, are guilty of overlooking the gravity of that task. It is a tall order to any nation. The key instrument that we created to smooth the transition was the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Instead of granting a blanket amnesty to apartheid-era killers and torturers, they had to make full concessions to the commission, demonstrated that they had acted with a political purpose. So when the commission concluded its business, its report to the president recommends hundreds of prosecutions of those who didn't meet the requirements for amnesty. It also recommended a series of measures to address inequality, including a wealth tax, to contribute to stopping the suffering we inherited from our past. These recommendations were important because they underscored the principle of accountability. And not implementing the recommendations severely set back the principles of accountability and social and economic justice. The nation-building project that was characterized the Mandela presidency was effectively abandoned and replaced by impunity. This was a critical turning point in the history of our country. Let me turn to the Good Manifesto. Our recipe in our manifesto is to rebalance society. When I visit communities and see people how they live with no food in their cupboards, children with sores, without hope for anything better, I feel angry and I feel ashamed. You can't build a stable country on foundations of injustice and inequality. We should have done better as a country. The Good Party was established in 2019 because we needed a viable alternative to the old parties. Most South Africans are good people who would like to contribute to fixing our country. They know that evil prospers when good people do nothing. They need a comfortable platform from which to make that difference. Good is a social democratic party, and South Africa doesn't need a strong private sector or a state-regulated economy. We need both. Over the past few years, you've seen at local, provincial, and national levels of government, as good, we have strived to be the most pragmatic and constructive opposition we can be. And the Good Manifesto is our recipe to rebalance our society. Our manifesto doesn't offer free flights to the moon, maybe one-way tickets to the moon, or a wish list for Father Christmas. And nor is our manifesto based on negativity towards anyone, or vengeance or hatred. The promises other parties are making won't materialize on the 1st of June 2024. Because the structure of government will be the same. The same structure that struggled to deliver to the nation's satisfaction. If we don't change the structure, we will achieve no more than changing the position of the deck chairs on the Titanic. We have created a bureaucracy of note, largely modeled on control systems borrowed from our northern nations. There is much we can learn from them, but to simply take their template and apply it to our civil service is not necessarily the most comfortable fit. Our structure must be professionalized to improve efficiencies. We don't need new plans every 5 years. The best plans in the world aren't worth the paper that they are written on if they are not implemented. Government has put some good plans on the table over the years. The question that we need to ask as South Africans is why, with budgets approved by Parliament, it hasn't done so with its own policies. And the Good Manifesto rests on the 4 pillars, like I've said, the 4 justices. Social justice, economic justice, spatial justice, and environmental justice. And our Secretary General will take us through that later. It is my task today to set up some context and answer the question millions of South Africans are grappling with. And that question is, who do I trust sufficiently to lend my vote to on the 29th of May? That is the questions that South African is grappling with. We say the face of poverty in South Africa is that of a woman of color. If she has a job besides raising children, which isn't even regarded as a real work, she's likely to earn less than men. If you look closely, you may see the scars she bears of the plague of gender-based violence. Because of our history, gender and identity are not boxes that simply require ticking in our election manifestos. They speak to the heart of our society's deficit of healing. Gender and identity equality cuts across all our 4 pillars of justice. In 2019, I was the only woman-led party to win seats in Parliament. Now, I'm used to be outnumbered, though never outmuscled by any man. In 2004, I was the first woman in this country to lead a party represented at all 3 levels of government in our new democracy. Now, it's stating the obvious to say that the levels of inequality, consumptiveness, and destruction in the world have occurred under the most exclusive leadership of men. According to the World Economic Forum, women in South Africa still earn 23 to 35% less than men for the same work. And this contributes to women's under-evaluation, a major driver for the toxic masculinity that we have in our country. We must transform our society to ensure equal pay for equal work. 2 years ago on Women's Day, Good invested in a campaign to encourage women and girls, survivors of abuse, to break the culture of silence and to make their voices heard. We call the campaign, Don't Shut Up, Speak Up. Our materials have been engaged by upwards of 12 million people, and we've been quietly contributing to hundreds of victims to help them to rise back on our feet. Good has invested more than 300,000 in this campaign. So when we say we have a zero-based approach to sexual misconduct, we don't just write it into our manifesto. When our own male members are accused of misconduct, we don't deter with integrity committees and such like. We convene disciplinary hearings according to our own constitution. And if they found guilty, we chuck them out. Go, we'll chuck you out. We equally have a zero-based policy to homophobia. Once again, we don't just say it and condemn homophobic violence when it provides a convenient platform. It is an embedded value that cuts across all 4 pillars of good. We establish an LGBTQI+ desk because we understand that to exclude people based on their color, their culture, religious belief, gender, or sexual identity is crude and it's repulsive. We say that you don't need to be a black person to fight racism. You don't need to be gay to fight homophobia. And you don't need to be a woman to fight against gender inequality. Let me turn to Palestine. We condemn the violence committed against civilians by the State of Israel and Hamas. But we are clear on the rights of the Palestinian struggle against Israeli apartheid. Because as South Africans, we recognize the suffering. We've been through that. We remember the injustices of forced removals, the curtailment of people's free movement, and the way the Boers eroded, corroded our dignity. We say clearly that we are not against the people of Jewish faith, but we are firmly against the exclusionary, discriminatory policies of the Zionists running Israel. We are revolted by the injustice of the genocide against the people of Gaza and by the fact that unfair and imbalanced power relations around the world permit it. We demand an immediate ceasefire, and we call on the United Nations to implement its own resolutions on the establishment of an independent state of Palestine, along an independent state of Israel. And we also want to commend our government for the principled stance of taking Israel to the International Court of Justice. Let me turn to poverty. The extent of poverty threatens to dismantle all the gains we have made since dismantling apartheid. The fact that nearly 9 million of us are so severely poor as to qualify for the 350 grant, and that we can't look to the economy to release the pressure by generating more jobs is our #1 crisis in this country. The fact that the 350 is less than half of an adult's needs to feed him or herself is a recipe for disaster. If the economy cannot provide for people's basic needs, the Constitution provides. This responsibility falls to the state to provide. The present suffering of our people demands the implementation of a basic income grant. The fact that our economy is not growing and not creating enough jobs, it's not the fault of poor people. It's because of poor leadership. A good government will implement a basic income grant of a minimum of 999 rand per month to all unemployed people. Now, let me tell you, this again is not an election slogan. We have been campaigning for the introduction of a basic income grant for more than a year. We didn't pull the 999 out of the air either. The number was informed by independent economic research on affordability to the fiscus. We can afford a basic income grant through a combination of restructuring government, increase efficiency, professionalize the public service, cutting out corruption and some tax reform. Because corruption steals directly from our poor people. In this campaign, it's good we use our own money to test the impact of people receiving 999 rand a month. We launched a pilot micro-entrepreneurship project last year already. We distributed more than 50,000 rand to individuals in Gauteng, the Western Cape, and the Eastern Cape. And each participant had to present a business plan on how the 1,000 rand would be spent to build a livelihood. Some people bought socks, some people bought cleaning products. Just yesterday in Kebega, a young man who was a trained welder, we gave him 1,000 rand and he bought some materials to make burglar bars. So the 1,000 rand enabled them to purchase their initial stock, which they can then sell at a profit to buy more stock, as well as keep some for their living expenses. So the initial results of our campaign has been very pleasing. But it is a demonstration of what the state could be doing at scale. But it's not. To switch on thousands of new entries into the economy. And I also challenge all other political parties to consider using some of the funding they get from the fiscus to assist struggling people rather than using that money only on billboards and posters to get themselves re-elected. We all have a responsibility in this country to rebuild and reconstruct our country. Because fixing the economy won't happen overnight. The bottom line is that we need to apply ourselves to the macro challenges such as electricity supply without neglecting the micro needs of the millions who have been stripped of their dignity over decades and centuries. We need to make South Africa a comfortable place for the middle class to live in and to do business, but not at the continuing cost or to the poor people of our country. Let me turn to spatial justice. Now, our progress as a country to undo the injustice of land dispossession and forced removals have been too slow, painfully slow. Instead of building subsidized homes in good areas and taking the opportunity to integrate our communities, the vast majority of homes we have built is miles away from town and job centers, perpetuating apartheid spatial planning. So the state holds significant land parcels, including farms. All three spheres of government own land. And these governments must release this land for redistribution for socio-economic justice. They all have a responsibility, not just national government. Public land must be used for public good. A good government will prioritize the development of higher density, mixed income, mixed use, rental homes in the inner city, not 40 kilometers away. And to address the reality that most of our people live many miles away from work, and they can ill afford to spend the crumbs that they earn on expensive public transport. Opportunities must be developed to bring jobs closer to our people. For example, we can build more government departments in poorer areas. So as good, we are particularly concerned also about the rise of homeless people and the inadequacy of the state's response. Many of us drive past them without appreciating how desperate these people's circumstances were to drive them onto the streets. Homelessness can't be arrested, we can't deport them, we can't bury them. The state, at all its levels, must provide suitable temporary housing for people experiencing homelessness, combined with proper health and support services until permanent housing can be arranged. Let me turn to ethical leaders and ethics. Because we hear in all the manifestos, they're talking about eradicating corruption. It's nice to say, but evidently tough to deliver. So I take pride in my reputation for tolerating no nonsense when it comes to corruption. And this is a reputation I acquired in the school of the hard knocks of the apartheid-era labor movement. Well, I can be that Auntie Pat with a smile, the best recipe for pickled fish, but when the boxing gloves come off, I'm known for swinging that boxing glove in the right direction. So public representatives who steal money that could be spent on improving the lives of the poor people, they are not public representatives. They are thieves. And they must be sent to prison and not to parliament. When I blew the whistle on the arms deal in the late 1990s, I wasn't solely motivated by the desire to damage the ruling party's reputation, but by values, the values that most of us share about what is right and what is wrong. Later, as the mayor of the city of Cape Town, I obtained a string of clean audits, but that was a moral obligation to and an ethical principle. Then when corrupt civil servants under my watch tried their tricks in public works, procuring the erection of the fence at Bay Bridge, I called in the Special Investigating Unit. The officials were suspended, and the court later ordered that all profits from the project be returned from the contractor to the taxpayers. And when I moved across to tourism, amongst my first action was to stop the crooked Tottenham Hotspur's deal. And we saved the country R1 billion. So this blue liar is called the DA, who incidentally accepted 5 ambassadors' posts to serve in the ANC government. They are now saying, my accepting a position in the cabinet means good has been captured by the ruling party. By this twisted logic, their fellow travelers in the moonshot pack, or what are they called today, I don't know. The IFP leaders, the Freedom from Past leaders, AZAPU, National Freedom Party, they all served in cabinet because it is a culture started by Nelson Mandela since 1994 to have an opposition leader in cabinet. Not to mention that their own leader said recently that he would accept a position in cabinet if offered. I mean, a large part of the trouble that South Africa finds itself in is the product of a one-trick pony of an official opposition that for decades has added nothing constructive to fixing this country. Good opposition requires more than just opposing everything in sight, and while gleefully attributing our vows to black incompetence and to corruption. Weaponizing the allegations of corruption doesn't move us forward. Allegations must be investigated, and the crooks must be held to account. And as good, we would like to see South Africa implement much stronger measures to defend whistleblowers. To defend whistleblowers in the civil service and in the private sector and in the communities. I was a whistleblower myself. We must protect and incentivize and reward whistleblowers. In a society of criminal impunity, where those who break the law often do so in the secure knowledge that they won't be caught, whistleblowers should not only be protected, they must be treasured in our country. So now I'm calling on all South Africans to switch to good. South Africans, you have the power and you have the responsibility to stop the suffering. The process begins by sending people with integrity to Parliament. People who are not there to enrich themselves or just play different groups of us up against each other. People with a vision of developing a fair, just, inclusive, and united country that many of us have fought for. We want to see a sustainable country at peace with itself. And we welcome the fact that our politics are now maturing. We are excited to see the immediate post-apartheid era of old party dominance that has not served our country well is busy waning. And we call on South Africans to invest your votes wisely in people with values, people with principles, and a genuine desire to build a country in which all of us can feel at home. So my fellow brothers and sisters, I call on all of you to use your constitutional right on the 29th of May to chart a new course of prosperity that can only come by acknowledging our interdependence as fellow South Africans, and then the unfinished business of 1994. Because this is where we are. There are unfinished business of 1994 that can stop the suffering. And we can stop the suffering as South Africans. I thank you for listening to me, and God bless. Amandla. Amandla.
So today, Good presents for a fairer and more prosperous society free from human suffering.